Hello, welcome to my comprehensive review of Riot Games' announcement of the 2018 NALCS changes regarding franchising or permanent partnerships, revenue sharing, etc. So I wanted to make a little caveat before I make this video because I made a video like this in 2016 during or shortly after Reggie came out about the patch changes and the struggle with kind of revenue in eSport orgs, specifically in League of Legends, and the whole kerfluffle started on Reddit, and then Riot Games came out in December with the updated information about the BAMTech deal. So essentially, like last time that I made a video about this, a rioter, very high up rioter, accused me of being a team owner's dog, and I want to clarify 100% that these opinions and the information that I'm going to share with you comes from my passion about League of Legends. So I started becoming interested in League of Legends as an avid fan of sport management in 2012, 2013 when I discovered it online and became a player. And I've written a number of blogs on the subject of sport management and the creation of League of Legends as a sport. In fact, I've even popularized some pieces of research about it. The very first video on my YouTube channel from 2013 is actually a piece about the development of League of Legends as a sport and what that might look like. And then I proceeded to build my career on the predictions that I was making there. So my observations are my own. They're not based on some sort of secret inside information. Anybody could do the same thing that I'm doing. If they, for example, I was teaching at the sport management department in the University of Jyväskylä, so I've done a lot of reading on modern theories of sport management. I'm rather familiar with European sport management and North American sport management in various leagues. And the spying, so I've been spying on Riot Games' eSport division for the last 5 years, and because it's interesting to me, because it's something I'm fascinated by. And so how do I collect this information? Basically, I do a lot of running around on LinkedIn. So I track a lot of Riot employees on LinkedIn and kind of see what their job descriptions are and where they're moving around and what their histories are. I draw lots of internal org charts of what the eSport division looks like at various times as it kind of like sometimes gets closer to what a sport league looks like, sometimes gets farther away from what a sport league looks like. I read all of their corporate blogs and watched all of the job listings that Riot Games has been putting out for the last 5 years. I pay attention to, interviews about player salaries and inside information like Monty's tell-alls and things like that. So that's where I get all of this information and how I kind of like put it together in a theory-driven way. So I'm not doing this as a dog of one of the owners, and I'm not doing it as some sort of like secret undermining mission, and I don't have all this insider information I'm leaking. I'm doing it as a passionate fan of League of Legends eSport and through my own information gathering and driven kind of like personal research over the last 5 years. All right, so that's the caveat out of the way. Story time. Let's take a trip in the Wayback Machine, the formation of the League of Legends ecosystem in 2013, 2014. Fundamental principles that Riot Games did here was they created revenue sharing. So they basically took skin sales and they turned it into players' salaries. So this is the first form of revenue sharing. And Riot was essentially saying, we want to build an ecosystem. That means something that's self-sustaining, that can like be driven in a market-driven way towards more success rather than trying to put together like a one-time tournament or a one-time thing. Okay. The other kind of fundamental principle that they based it on was they support an improvement of the broadcast. So this is when they partnered with the NFL consultancy and they brought in a lot of outside ideas and kind of started mimicking and taking seriously the sport approach to the broadcast. Storytelling, graphics, overlays, everything kind of like started springing up around this time. And and I need to address also the hiring practices, because if you look at League of Legends hiring practices as opposed to, for example, CSGO, with the Turner League, what you see is that Riot Games stayed very true to their company's hiring practices in their foray into eSport. So they do culture over skill set, and I don't mean like they hire somebody worse versus somebody who's better over culture. What I mean is that they keep looking for somebody who's good and also fits the culture. Okay. They prefer attraction versus headhunting. So Riot Games prefers to attract a lot of talent and then use the talent that they have and find people within their ecosystem who can do the roles rather than going out and headhunting for a specific job or skill set. Although sometimes they've been known to do that. And then finally, they prefer endemics over specialists. So rather than going and getting like an outside specialist, they prefer somebody who's endemic to their culture or their industry, etc., and to kind of retrain them or have them learn about the thing that they need to specialize in. And so you could say that they prefer loyalty versus expertise, or loyalty over expertise. So these are the principles that Brandon and Mark kind of founded Riot Games on as a game company, and they carried that into the eSport division, and they stayed true to it, which is why, for example, there's a lot of criticism of the people who were heading the eSport division that they didn't really have any background in sport, that they had to learn all these new things on the fly. Same with the broadcast division, even though they did bring in a lot of like TV talent, like people who had good production capabilities, but they still spent a lot of time attracting that and not quite as much time, going out specifically headhunting people who might not function within the Riot ecosystem. So those are the fundamental principles that Riot kicked off in 2013 to 2014, kind of like with the first League of Legends ecosystem, which matured. So the maturation of the League of Legends ecosystem, 2014 to 2015, that's the era that I like to identify that is. And the fundamental movements that happened during this time are the following. Riot figured out they were a live events company, so they started putting on more and more live events. They got better and better at it, and they realized, oh, this is something really serious that we have to do and that we're doing. And they got really good at it. They refined their player management. So the player management that is like on site and how it is that they handle the orgs and how they move the players around, it just improved overall. Their org handling improved. So the way that they handled the orgs and the rules around them and coming in of the league and going out of the league and what they could do on stage and kind of their rule set defining what an org is and what they do for players, etc. Kind of worked out a lot of kinks during this era. Their broadcast plotted. Okay, so during the maturation, I would say that they did have graphical reboots. So you could see that they were having like an approach to the graphics that was indicative of each season of something new. Usually it trended with the current design trends, which was really cool to see. That they always were like hip to the most modern and cutting edge design trends that were on the web. However, they used the same spectator client this entire time, and there was only a slow increase of new caster talent at this time. And the marketing also plotted. So there was a focus on written word. I don't know if you remember, but LOL eSports used to be all like written content for some reason, even though nobody in eSport reads anything. I know because I was blogging since 2012 and like my videos, my first few videos got more views than the total aggregate reading that had been done in the years that I'd been blogging in eSport. So for some reason they were stuck on the written word, which kind of makes sense when you have content marketers who are taking over something and they don't realize that video is how eSport is driven, because it's just harder to do, right? It's easier to hire freelance writers. And they kind of, during the maturation period here, they kind of refused to do storytelling. It felt to me like they were trying to, like they were putting this in the orgs department. They're saying, okay, you guys need to do this. You guys all need your TSM legends. You guys need to like storytell your players and build up their brands. That's what your job is. Okay. Then we have the stagnation of the LOL ecosystem. So this is 2015 to 2016. So the fundamental problems that happened during this era that lead it to me labeling it as the stagnation era is that the company was growing exponentially. So Riot, like their revenue and their employee numbers were growing exponentially, just like shooting crazily through the roof. They had a disconnect with how orgs monetize. So they didn't quite understand how orgs monetize and the value that Riot brings to an org or a team as a business. Okay. And there was a big misunderstanding of the elite performance beast that they had created. So essentially, when you create a bell curve of skill and then you use the elite performers at the top of that bell curve, you've created a feedback loop wherein people want to beat the people at the top and you have to drive higher and higher performance, and it's limited by the limits of human performance, right? So in sport, that's really easy to understand because you can only work out for a certain number of hours a day before your body breaks, right? So everybody runs at the limit of injury in traditional sport. In eSport, that rule is broken because much like swimming, it's a low injury sport, which means you can train it an excessive amount. Therefore, it will be trained an excessive amount. There's no way to limit that once you unleash the elite performance beast and say that the winner takes all. Once you do that, then people will want to pursue higher levels. Therefore, they will pursue it to the extent of their abilities. Therefore, in eSport, they will train essentially all the livelong day. Okay? So there was a misunderstanding of the beast that like Riot Games had released, and there was a misunderstanding of the elite performance value chain. So if you look at other entertainment industries, so not elite performance industries, but other entertainment industries that are driven by the kind of numbers of actors, let's call the players actors in this case, or talent, that Riot was producing and the amount of value that they were producing for Riot at this time, there was a big disconnect with like how much they were being paid. And this is the video I made in 2016 where I said, I think it's insane that the players are making less than employees and managers in Riot. I think that if you look at you have a bell curve of 100 million League of Legends players, and at the top you have, at the time I calculated it, somewhere between 800 and 1,200 pro players globally that were being paid, which represents 0.002% elite performance section of the bell curve, which is a massive amount of standard deviations away from normal, right? So you have here the best of the best of the best, who are sacrificing everything about their lives, including their livelihood and their health and weekends and any sort of like conception of a balanced life in pursuit of mastery of a single thing. And they were bringing inordinate value to a company by doing that, but they were being rewarded less than like a standard employee who gets a benefits package and vacation and weekends free and weeknights and all of these other like hobbies and all these kind of things that people in the middle of the bell curve. So you and I, like average people who want average lives, who want to be able to go and have a girlfriend or go and pursue a hobby or go and just do something, like go see a movie or whatever. If you want that kind of balanced life, you cannot be an elite performer. You cannot become world class at something. It's like off the table. You get to choose, right? And you choose normality. So when you have this kind of elite performance in an entertainment industry that drives massive value, what you see is that it's inordinately rewarded, but it wasn't being inordinately rewarded. And I had a big problem with that. And that was 2016 at the height of the stagnation. On the flip side of this, there was a big disconnect between the value that should be being driven out of the broadcast of League of Legends and what was actually happening. So I was watching the marketing division of eSport. In 2013, what I expected was Riot Games would add more and more marketing and marketing sales and business development staff to their eSports division to go and sell sponsorships to monetize the broadcast and then distribute that revenues to higher and higher player salaries as they divorced the value of the eSport broadcast from skin sales, as they started to isolate that financially. And that they would drive ticket sales too, that they would try to expand maybe a tour or a live event or some sort of way to like expand ticket sales into larger and larger amounts, because those are the main revenue drivers in sport. But what happened was that division shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. And when I looked at it in late 2016, there were something like 2, I think from the outside, I'm not sure, but there were about 2 marketing or sales division or business development people left in the eSport division, right? So they basically eliminated all of them, which signaled to me that they didn't understand either they were pursuing some sort of other deal, or they didn't understand that that they were essentially like using eSport as a marketing vehicle to sell skins, but then they were using the skin money to build Riot, the game company, and not the eSport. Okay, so there were some nice things during the stagnation. There were some things that they were growing with and things they were doing really well, things they were focusing on when they didn't notice the other stuff that I had a problem with. And that was that they shifted to video content, thank goodness. So they started actually producing content that would be consumed by the people that are fans of the sport. And then they started working with their own talent to produce content and stories and start producing like all of this amazing stuff that we get to see, on a daily basis that kind of tells the stories of the teams and the players now. And they gave up. They didn't really give up on the orgs, but they decided, hey, we can do this also, and it would benefit us a lot. Okay, so then we have the revolution, right? The org revolt, essentially, of late 2016. And Riot did a patch in December, like kind of more or less immediately. They said, okay, we're going to, first of all, they realized something was wrong. And secondly, they assigned, I don't know if you noticed, but several orgs talked about how they were in talks, and now it's been revealed that they were essentially like kind of sharing their information, and Riot was like, okay, we don't understand what's going on here. Let's go talk to the orgs and get some financial information. And I think in the most recent interview, Andy revealed the name Chris Hopper, who is one of the people in the financial sector who ended up in the eSport division, and then who apparently was like working with the orgs as league ops to kind of understand the structure of revenue of an org as they were thinking about like trying to build a new structure for the league. And the first thing that they did was they just increased prize pools, and they did small revenue share patching to kind of smooth things over till they could figure out what they wanted to do. And then they started, like I said, meeting with the orgs. Okay, so then evolution. So fall of 2016, essentially, after the revolution took place. These are the fundamental movements now that have been happening since that time, since the MLB advanced media deal was inked or worked on, all the way up until now, with the announcement today of like what is happening in the future, the 2018 NALCS. And I want to go through basically 3 really important points of this announcement, and then, of course, the main problems and the main questions in the future. So number 1, there's a new esport ecosystem. Riot is creating a market. So this is the same thing they did in 2012, and or 2013. I want to emphasize how important this is, that they are creating a triangular marketplace between Riot, the broadcast, the esport division, so the league ownership, the orgs, and the players, right? And they're positioning them all to gain something by working together, and all to negotiate against each other for their valued piece of the pie, and they're giving them all certain responsibilities, essentially. Now, this is really, really smart, because it's not short-term thinking, it's long-term thinking, and what it means is that if they choose the correct people and everybody's playing the game of maximizing their own potential, what it means is that everybody is kind of working together in a marketplace to drive value for everybody as well as themselves. So this is what they did in 2013, which led to the success of League of Legends eSports in the first place. And even though they kind of lost a handle on it, sometime in 2015, 2016, this reboot, or this kind of like pressure of where it's headed now, is a really smart way of structuring that tension that they need to create. And they're, by the way, accelerating that tension by creating a players association on the player side, because Riot kind of has their stuff together and the orgs have their stuff together, so they're kind of like forcing the players to get their stuff together too, in a way. Okay, so the second thing they're doing is revenue sharing. They're scaling it up again. So rather than just the 25K early on and then the prize pool bonus from last year, now they're scaling it up to a full like 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Third for Riot, third for players, a third for the orgs. And they're doing this in partnership with MLB, the Major League Baseball Advanced Media, one of the subsidiaries, I think BAM Technology, the technology division. So first of all, I want to point out this goes against Riot's modus operandi. So this is really important, because if you look at how they handled their router tech issue, where they just decided, okay, screw going to a third-party vendor, this isn't working, we want control, we're going to do it ourselves. They built their own tech. If you look at the internet situation, where they were like, screw working with all of these these top-end providers trying to get like low ping for our players, we're literally going to ink deals with all of these like small subsidiaries, build our own internet, piggybacking over the top of these providers. Or you look at the broadcast situation, where they were like, no, we're not going to partner with ESL or Turner or something like that. We're going to build our own broadcast in-house. Okay, so these are very Riot style endeavors, right? Where they want control and they want to do it perfectly, and they want to make sure that they choreograph and tailor every experience that you could have as a player or as a viewer. Jumping in with MLB AM signifies a couple things. One, they're super serious about getting this done fast. And so, the pressure from the fans and from the orgs is like accelerating the pace of this. And 2, they really believe in this partnership. They believe that both they'll be able to exit out of it. It's 2023, so it's like 6 years from now. I guess 5 years from now, by the time 2018 rolls around. And also that they're going to be able to have like a big kind of control of the partnership in a way, and that they believe in the tech that's going on here. So maybe they're planning on learning a lot. Maybe they're going to build it in-house as they go. Maybe they're going to continue this partnership. But however it works out, like this is something that it goes against their modus operandi, and I think signifies their strong intention to get stuff done and get it done fast, even though they still want to get it done well, right? Okay, so it shows their desire to fix things, basically. What was the deal? It was $50 million annual guaranteed at the baseline over 7 years, but they threw out the date, also 2023, so that's not 7 years by now. And that was like the guaranteed minimum, but they hope to make much more off of the monetization of the broadcast itself. And so if you split that up, if you just go, okay, well, the revenue share is a third, so that's 1.65 million per US or NALCS org, and that's about $330K per player in terms of base salary, depending on how they structure it, the deal. But if we're just going off like rough numbers on the back of a napkin, and you just are trying to figure out what's going on here in terms of the bare minimum that will happen, looks like it's the bare minimum that will happen. And of course, some of the player money might go to the player association or other sorts of fees, or be performance based. Like a lot of that, I think that they said 15% of it, the pay is going to be direct, and then another 15% is going to be performance based for the orgs. So the top org will get more and the bottom orgs will get less. I don't know about the players and how they're doing that. Okay, so the third really important thing, so we had a new esport ecosystem with 3 main players, which is really, really important because I want to iterate again how important it is that Riot is putting the players as like a pillar here, because a lot of times in sport that is left out. And what you have is like the org and the league, and they're kind of working together to essentially extract as much value from the consumers as possible. And they don't work as much with the players. Like the players get much less amount of the pie, which is why you see like multi-million-dollar baseball athletes striking for more money, because their bosses are still making exponentially more than them and keeping all of the money. So I think it's really smart of Riot to create the players as like a big, Riot's motto is player first, right? And this really signifies it. Not only they're focused, like I've always said, in live events and how they make their players feel like superstars at the LCS and also in live events, but in this move itself, they're really making sure that the orgs don't run away with too much power, essentially. That's what they want to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, so the third part, isolation of esport revenues. So this is, I think, the most key thing that's happening here. Basically, they're doing a team buy-in. So they're requiring each team to pay $10 million to kind of kick off the cash pool of the league, the esport division of League of Riot Games. And there's been discussion of tracking esport revenues and making sure that the interested parties or the partnered parties spend it properly. So Riot, that means they spend it on broadcasting and events. The orgs will spend the money on staff, coaching, and gaming houses, and the players will, of course, play and then get salary. Okay, so there has to be some sort of financial agreement there that kind of sees esport revenues as esport revenues, and then sees, how orgs also generate revenue, because they're also going to be contributing to the esport revenue prize or revenue share pool from the org itself. So that means that we're isolating the esports as a business unit with its own, which is really good for growth because it starts untangling it from the League of Legends freemium revenue streams, like the skin sales and the business model over there. So it's possible that in the future, we will see the development of and the isolation of the League of Legends game and revenue stream there, and then the esport division and their own kind of revenue streams derived from their own ecosystem, which is really, really good, because then there's a direct value connected between the player, the talent, the person who is driving the value, and the actual value that's being driven. So then Riot Games, the esport division, and the profits and losses table there will show this clear delineation of understanding, how much value this person drives, and that can only be good for players, essentially, and pros, as the value of what it is that we do in esport increases. Okay, so that is the story time. That's the end of the story time, and I kind of just wanted to update everybody on how I see the development and the evolution of League as an ecosystem. And now I want to dig into the main questions and the main problems, the future, and promising signs that I see. So main questions. Will locking the League destroy competitiveness? Personally, I've always thought this is bullcrap. I think players want to win. I think orgs that suck in other franchises get voted out. Riot doesn't want it, so they won't allow it. I don't understand the perspective of being somewhere in a competitive environment and not wanting to win, so I just don't get the question in the first place, and I don't think it's likely to happen. I don't see it happening in other sports very much. Second question, will shared revenue promote laziness? Now, this I'm more worried about because I think yes. I think people are driven by the market forces, and so we need market forces to be applied in the opposite direction of laziness in terms of revenue sharing. There needs to be some sort of structure that says if you're a poorly monetizing org that you and are not bringing as much to the table in your contribution to the league revenues as, for example, TSM, that you get your stuff together and that you start competing with them and trying to drive more revenue. Now, the good thing is that CEOs are competitors, right? I mean, they want to win. What do you think? They don't sit around all day watching Netflix and just wanting to be lazy and sitting on a couch. Like, they want to crush it. They want to make money. They want to be rich. They want to drive their org to be the best. So there is this internal intrinsic drive. If you get the right person, 10 of the right people, this is going to happen naturally. But it's a danger because I can't readily imagine how the market or the ecosystem would be structured to promote fair distribution or performance-based performance-based distribution of revenue share to kind of like motivate revenue light orgs to push to fight for it, to fight harder, right? Which is going to disincentivize orgs that are doing everything they possibly can and spending a lot of money and investing to create top line revenues and then giving it away to lazy orgs. That's something that I'm worried about. So I'm looking forward to like more information on how they're structuring that. Now, third question, player association funding. I think that this is going to most likely be funded by skimming from the top of player salaries pre-tax, just like every other single professional organization that's out there. Like the union that I'm a part of at my university. This isn't a union, by the way. It's not a player union. It's a player association. But the union I'm a part of at my university, we just pay pre-tax, like part of our salary every month, and that's that. Pays for all our lawyers. Okay. And the fourth question, marketing the league within League of Legends and outside League of Legends. So player acquisition and viewer acquisition, will the league explore other user streams outside of the game itself, right? So you have this great marketing engine within League of Legends is trying to pull players into the game and trying to pull active users back into the game. And then League of Legends eSport is marketing to them to try to get viewership. But I believe that there is a viewership amount outside of players that can be marketed directly to. And I know that it's going to cost extra money to do that, but I believe that it's something that should be explored and looked at, especially if the eSport division itself is going to be more financially isolated from the company. And follow up to that, are we going to be able to have different viewership modes for different spectators? Like, for example, in the app that MLB is creating with Riot Games, will we be able to have, an advanced spectator overlay where we'd see a much larger version of the minimap because that's 90% of what I watch when I'm spectating a game? Are we going to have a much more entertaining view of the game where it's like a tilted, 3D angle of the fight and of just like people fighting because that's much more interesting for people to watch, who don't really care about the minimap or the macro and just want to have it explained to them, and that can be like more isolated. So I think that these things are possible. I think that they need to be pushed on and explored, because if we just stick with the player base, that's great, but we can only grow as large as the player base. Which might be fine. The player base is massive, so there we go. And it's already built in. We're only spending marketing on one channel, and then we're pulling them from there, so good. But I still think it's worth exploring and worth the amount of money that would be spent to develop those kind of user income streams. Okay, so user income, incoming user streams or user acquisition. Okay, so main problems. Here are the three main problems that I see kind of that might crop up. So number one, the ability to evolve the game and pivot league structure into new games if necessary. So if we're going to build an amazing league, the game needs to keep evolving and being interesting. And if it starts dying, then the league itself should be able to pivot into either downscale or pivot into a new game, if Riot Games comes out with the next version. And so that needs to be considered, down the road. If we're going to build this amazing structure, you don't want to all of a sudden say, okay, 5,000 jobs are going away. Bye. When a video game dies or a video game league dies. Okay, number two, who is in charge? So I really like how the league was run before, because Riot Games was always in charge of everything, and they were brave enough to make strong executive decisions and just say, this is how it is, and now we're going to evolve forward very quickly because we have the power, so we can. Now the power might be distributed in some cases, and Riot even said they might get outvoted about some things regarding the NALCS. It's going to be distributed, which means it's going to be slower, and it's going to be less brave, right? It's going to be more conservative by default because it's much harder to have things change when you have a committee designing it versus somebody who's just executing and making decisions. And so I'm really worried about kind of the speed of change and adaptation and the bravery that Riot Games has always shown in their ability to make cutthroat decisions, that some of that might go away in the operation of the NALCS, which might be a detriment to the league. So I hope that somebody maintains some sort of executive control to override things, or that the group that they have that's kind of making decisions really considers one of their strengths to be the ability to pivot and the ability to be nimble, because that's really important in something like a tech-based sport. Okay, and the third problem is that EU is left out to dry due to the fractured nature of EU sponsorship budgets. So, for example, with football clubs in EU, you have to approach the company division of each country individually. So whereas there is, for an example, a Logitech North America, in Europe you have Logitech Spain and Logitech Germany and Logitech France, and they all have their own marketing budgets and their own salespeople and everything. And if you want to create, the North American Logitech has a marketing budget that encompasses the entire population of North America and is the same size as what would be representative of that, whereas like the marketing to budget in the EU is separated between each country depending on their population and what's reaching out there. And so you end up with this very fractured ecosystem, which is very hard to monetize in. And I think that this is really dangerous because now all of a sudden teams like Splice that kind of went for EU versus NA are really missing out on the value chain that League is driving, because League is driving similar-ish amounts of value in Europe, but it's much less monetizable in the current national ecosystem that is the EU, nationalized marketplace. So the future. What does the future look like? 3 really important points here. Number 1, Riot is going to start competing with Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook streaming. So they've said that they intend to create an app and try to capture the user experience of the viewership of League, and that gives them a ton of freedom. For example, in the app, maybe you can put different overlays on the stream. Maybe you can watch different spectators. Maybe you can watch the point of view of one player. All of these amazing things are possible now that they can broadcast to an app, and we have the technology in the broadcasting station to send out streams of all sorts of different varieties, and you can like hot switch them. So this might be an incredible experience, and you might be able to grab it on the Google Cardboards and throw it up and watch it in VR for all I know. Amazing, right? But it means they're going to be competing with Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, which means Facebook is, of course, and Twitch and YouTube are going to compete back, and there's going to be this moderate kind of war going on there. And I'm really curious, like how that's going to pan out, because I think it always behooves Riot to broadcast on those platforms as well, but they're going to want to broadcast on their own platform. You know what I mean? Okay, so number 2, in the future, Riot's app might help with this fractured EU marketplace by creating the ability for PanEuropean BuyIn. So you might be able to create a kind of controlled experience that allows for this Pan-European sponsorship to be negotiated through some sort of Riot entity that partners with the EU LCS to create these sales channels. And I think that's a really hard thing to organize and structure, but I think it's totally worth it, because I think the same value can be driven out of the EU LCS as from the North American LCS, and it's going to be sad when the players' salaries in North America explode through the roof and the EU salaries are sitting here at like German levels, basically. Because Germany is where most of the sponsorships lie, Okay. So, and by the way, Germany's population is what, like 35 million or somewhere between 30 and, oh my gosh. I used to know this off the top of my head. But anyway, it's, on a scale of 1/10 the size of the United States population. So obviously you can imagine that budgets are similar scale, different in terms of the companies that are purchasing sponsorships. Okay, so third point for the future, teams will be starting to, as they feel more secure in this franchise or this locked-in model, once they buy in, they're going to be doing all sorts of things to create more activation of you and me and create more revenue drive. Things like making apps, making digital products, making in-game items maybe. It's easier to partner with Riot for in-game items when they know that you're not going to be leaving the game ever. Non-gamer merchandise, so expanding their brands into things like apparel and fashion and stuff like that. Hardware, like Fnatic is doing, with Fnatic gear, which is amazing, and they're really opening up their revenue channels in that way. So there's all of these things that are going to be piling in the future that teams are going to tackle that are more than just like the cap and the World's jacket, and all that's Riots, but the cap and the jacket and that kind of like simplistic kind of straightforward stuff. Okay, and finally, promising signs. So I went through a lot of like some negativity and some positivity, and here's some promising signs that I like from all of the news that I saw here. So number one, user-generated content from related to Riot's opinion towards it. So one thing Riot has always been amazing at is focusing on user-generated content and not shutting it down. Okay, so they don't shut down derivative content. They provide a lot of League of Legends art for use and for creation of derivative content. They have this Flickr channel where they provide all of this amazing images. They have a reasonable approach to shutting down and negotiating like licensed products like the stream and stuff like that. They try to work it out as much as possible. They're like really player user focused in terms of all of the game assets. And I think that that's very promising for the future broadcasting and what derivatives are going to come out of League of Legends eSport as it becomes its own kind of, financial beast. Okay, so number two, they're maintaining their culture in hiring the orgs, right? So the teams. So if you think about the Riot Games hiring practices that I mentioned earlier, Jared on the video today, he was asked, how are you going to choose the orgs? And he gave three ways. And it was really funny because he's like, well, number one, we want orgs that share our vision. Number two, they have a plan to build a brand. And number three, they share our vision. And okay, the first one was they share our vision on building a great fan sport. And the third one is they share our vision on long-term league strategy. But basically, they're really interested in the culture of the people. Same as their hiring practices in the original company itself. And I think that this is really important because it means that they aren't just going to throw out endemic people who are really on board culturally and maybe not the most business savvy. They're not just going to throw them out for like a cutthroat business person who has no clue what's going on in terms of the culture of working together and being nice to each other. So I think that that's promising. Okay, third point, once again, Riot is throwing away some of their top-end revenue to build and ensure an ecosystem that will naturally move on market forces due to the good structure towards a better future. So I thought that this move was very noble in 2013 when they essentially, threw away some of their top-end revenue and supported the structure of this loss leader in a way that would build an ecosystem that drove all of this value for other parties, right? And they did that because it naturally moved towards a good structure. And now they're doing that again, where they're throwing away even more of the top-end revenue that they could drive in order to support an ecosystem that is then going to, on market-based principles, like grow even bigger. So one of the reasons they're winning as an esport is because of this nature that Riot has of kind of looking at the long term and throwing away a little bit of money in the short term with good planning. Obviously, if you throw away money and you don't have good planning, that sucks, but it's paid out so far. All right, and the last one is tech. So in 2015 to 2016, the era of stagnation, I said one of the problems was the lack of iteration of their tech. And now I think with the MLB AM deal, they're kind of diving back into becoming a tech shop and creating a tech product. And I think that they're going to be leading quickly into VR, I hope. Interesting things like that. We saw at Rio on the broadcast. I don't know if you guys noticed, but there was a projected 3D version of the game in the middle of the stage on the broadcast itself, and you could see the people kind of like walking out of the fountain three-dimensionally. You think of these hologram concerts in Japan, the live events should be hologrammed out, like full arenas that you're sitting in the middle theater in the round and you can see the whole rift. Why are you watching on a screen when it could be 3D modeled right there? Things like, this MLBAM app, maybe then it allows you to be in the rift and to drive around yourself and kind of watch the game with your own three-dimensional VR goggles that are, your phone, launched in the app with a Google Cardboard, the $10 like turn an iPhone into a VR holder or whatever. But anyway, I think that these things are possible, and I think that I'm excited that Riot is working on them behind the scenes and that there's indications of this happening, because that is cool. I'm sorry. Just going to geek out about that for a second. All right, so that's my video. Oh, man. Really excited to get all this information off my chest. Glad my research is paying off. If you have any questions, please hit me up in either a Reddit thread somewhere that this might be posted, or in the down below the video. I try to reply to almost all of my YouTube comments. You can also just message me on social media, on Twitter or whatever. And make sure to subscribe to my channel for more awesome videos like this. And I will see you guys next time.